Hi, everybody.
Uh, I was
Okay,
thinking if there was any schedule change rather than 10:30. Okay.
that's fine. I think so let me ask a question of those of you who are on. I know, Shalma, you were on earlier and I had sent out messages, so maybe you missed them about moving it to 10:30. But if we were to do this again next week, would that work for everybody, or does that create a problem at
For
10:30?
me, it works, Loner.
It creates a problem, Loner, for you?
No, it works.
It works. Okay, good. Um, if it doesn't work for anyone, I mean, you don't need to tell me today. If you're not comfortable doing that, you can send me an email. But I think what I need to do, the college has got some accreditation. It's an important kind of process that the college is going through to keep their accreditation as a college. And I'm somewhat involved in some of the meetings there. And I think I'm going to need to do this again next week. So we'll start at 10:30. I'll send another message out, a reminder out for everybody as well. Okay, so today we're going to cover planning a resume and writing a resume. And I've got some slides to go through. So before I begin, are there any questions at this point? No, we're good? Okay. All right, let's start with chapter 4, planning a resume. Now, I think let's just kind of set the stage here a little bit for this so that we understand why the resume is important, but also understand its purpose as a tool. And there was a time, I'd say 20 years ago or more, that when you were looking for work, your resume was the most important tool. The resume, your references, and the cover letter at that time. This is kind of before the internet became kind of more of a useful tool in the process. So you'd really carry around, or you'd mail or deliver by hand your resume with your references listed. And the process that an employer would use to review your resume was much more simple. There wasn't, if the job got posted, there weren't 1,000 people applying to the job. There was more of a manageable number where the company and its HR department could get involved in really reading a resume and kind of sifting through things. Decision process to hire was a lot shorter. It didn't involve a lot of these other tools like background checks and what have you. So the world's changed quite a bit. What also has changed is this idea of the resume. There was a time your parents, largely to me at the time of looking for work opportunities, it was critically important because largely that was the basis upon which to interview you or not. Today, as I went through last week, it's very different. So the way I want to frame this resume is that the resume is a critically important tool that needs to be constructed correctly, not because it's going to get you the job, because the resume itself isn't going to get you the job, but the resume is like a ticket to getting into the process, to getting into the venue. And if you don't have a resume, or you have a resume that's not carefully put together, you're going to have a very hard time engaging companies to be interviewed and considered for employment. Because many people are really spending careful time constructing the resume in a way that makes them interesting. So what the purpose of the resume is, it is your tool, your ticket to get into the process, to get to the next step. And that's really all it is. Unfortunately, there are very few people that are going to have their resume read. I mean, carefully read through it. They're going to scan it. Almost every company today runs your resume first through a software program to look, and we'll talk more about that here in a few slides about what the software program does. But in effect, the employer doesn't really look at you carefully until you've gone through a lot of their process of sifting out issues or corrections or problems so that they can get to a manageable number. So the idea for an employer is that hiring people is expensive, that what I want to do is use inexpensive steps to screen a large pool of people down to a smaller number. And at that point, I'm going to spend my time reviewing resumes and interviewing people. So, and that's actually the state of things. So what we want to do is want to have a good, solid resume that represents ourselves well, that makes people who are looking at it, once they do, interested in talking further with us. Or to say it differently, what you don't want to do with your resume is put everything you possibly can into the resume on the presumption that someone's going to carefully read it and understand it, and they won't. Most resumes are one page. They're scanned quickly. Um, so you want to be careful in how you put that together. Now, I'm going to say that it might be now that your mic is on, so we're picking up some background noise. That could be old guy. Hopefully you can hear me. Not sure what the noise is. Kind of distracting. Loner, yes?
Yes, that was my question. The noise.
Okay. All right. So let's go ahead and all right, there we go. All right. Well, hopefully that'll resolve itself. So let's go ahead and get into chapter 4. So what are the goals? Learn how to plan and write a winning resume that captures prospective employers' attention and leads to interviews. Another way to think of this is that if you've ever been in a bookstore and you're looking at books, what you tend to do is you look at the cover and you look at the back of the book, and you make a presumption of whether you're going to open the book up to learn more about it. Now, you might be incented to open it up and read the preface or the introduction of the book, but that's what your resume and cover letter are really attempting to do. You're trying to stand out enough in a kind of simple way where the employer understands enough about your value to want to know more. So in some respects, less is more is a better way to approach your resume. So here's some advice from an expert. This is a career counselor. Good resumes are easy to read and engaging. Now, there are no typos, using good English, grammar, spelling. They make statements and back them up with facts. So, and we'll get into this, but sweeping generalizations like I'm a good person, I like dealing with people, I'm a hard worker, those aren't helping the employer understand why they should talk with you further. Those are basically generalizations. So if you're going to say I'm a hard worker, give an example. I ran a project. We spent a lot of time outside the process to ensure that the project was done well. We improved the company's revenue by 10% or 5%. We lowered costs by 2%. Those are okay, but just basically saying, I like people, I'm a hard worker, and I follow direction. That's basically everybody. Everybody's going to say that. So that doesn't make you distinct. It doesn't help the employer understand why they should spend time talking with you further. Common resume errors, dated top. And this is not an exaggeration. It's been a few years ago, but I was reviewing resumes with the students in this class, and there was a person who was returning to school, was a little older, and they gave me the resume, and the resume was 8 pages long, and it was 8 pages of very small type, and it was something that the person took great pride in. So it was a little more challenging to have them understand that was too much information, and she was frustrated because she wasn't getting work opportunities or introductions. So we had to walk through it a little bit. We significantly reduced the content of the resume, and she started to get questions about doing interviews. So it started to work well for her. lack of accomplishments, and personal style. So now a lot of students don't have a lot of work experience or enough to compete with other people who do have experience. And we're going to talk a little bit about that and how to get around the work experience. But if you haven't already, I'd encourage each of you to look at doing what I would call an internship or a co-op. And all that simply is a part-time job. If you're an accounting major, get a part-time job with either with a company that's doing accounting, an accounting firm, or a business that's doing payroll, or approach your current employer and ask if you can shadow someone for 4 or 5 hours a week who's doing accounting work, because that you can put on your resume and you can begin to talk to employers about that experience. So that's something to think about. Leslie learned to identify your key skills and abilities and write about her accomplishments and to show how she could become a benefit to prospective employer. Now, this is a key statement in the sense that, remember the first chapter we talked about is knowing yourself well. Well, Leslie spent time identifying key skills and abilities so that she could describe them and describe them in a way that helps the employers. Now remember, the employer has an empty seat they have to fill. They don't really know you well enough, nor will they ever really know you well enough to know that you're the person that they should put in that seat. So your job in this process isn't just to write a resume or submit it and wait, or answer questions and wait for them to ask you another question. You're there to help guide and coach the employer on why they should look at you carefully as someone that would add value to the company, why that would be, you would be a good person. Employers are not looking for seat warmers. They're not looking for, they've got an empty job and they're trying to put someone in to make that seat warm. They're trying to find someone with skills and talents, commitments, habits, attitudes. They're going to make a difference for that company. And your job isn't just to provide them background information. You've got to convince an employer that by knowing yourself well, that you're the person they should hire. So use a plan for success worksheets. Now there are worksheets for chapters 4 and 5. They're the PDFs, you can print them. These are really good at helping you kind of gather together information about what could be on your resume, how to organize it. If you haven't looked at already, I would definitely encourage you to start looking at those PDF worksheets for this particular week for developing your resume. Those are career action worksheets. Chapter 4 covers the purpose and role of a resume, which we talked about a little bit already. You're not going to get a job opportunity that you're seeking unless you have a resume, but having a resume isn't going to get you the job. It's just going to get you into the process. Planning the main sections of a winning resume. We'll look at examples here of different resumes and how they work. Showcasing your personal brand or your resume. In other words, what is it unique about you? I mean, you could be uniquely gifted in knowing how to lead people, knowing how to incentivize people, knowing how to motivate them, knowing how to organize projects. But unless you tell the employer what you're good at, what your personal brand is, you're leaving me guessing. And frankly, you don't look any different than the last person that I looked at for employment or the next person. Know the purpose of the resume, describe each section of a resume, gather the right information needed to start writing your resume. So you want to, dates, times, titles, the order of them. What's a resume, the role of resumes. Okay, so now we're getting into warm introductions and cold leads. Once you have a resume, then the next question is, well, what do you do with it? Now, in many cases, if you wanted to work or apply for work at Nike or Intel or Boeing or any large organization, they're going to have on their website at the bottom, they'll say something like careers, and you click on that, they'll show you what jobs are open and available. and they'll provide you links to upload your resume, your cover letter, and maybe references. And they'll also probably ask you to complete an online application for that company. And they're going to walk you through that process. Now, for the most part, everybody that's out actively looking for work is using what are called cold leads. And what that simply means is that you're approaching companies and employers without them knowing who you are or where you came from, and as if you were meeting someone for the first time. They don't know who you are. I mean, if you're meeting at a business convention and it's the first time you're meeting someone, that's called a cold introduction. A warm introduction is a process where someone who knows you is introducing you to the employer or introducing you to someone who's employed by the company you want to work with. So imagine going to a luncheon as an accounting major at Mount Hood, going to a Chamber of Commerce meeting, and you're going to a luncheon. The luncheon's free because you're a student, and you're sitting at a table of seven other people who own businesses in the community, or are accountants or accounting, are employed by accounting firms. And the group is going to want to know who you are, and they're going to want you to introduce yourself. Who are you? What made you come today? What are your interests are? And this is where you get a chance to talk about that elevator pitch, or help people identify why you're there. I mean, just to say shyly and meekly, well, I'm going to school, I'm hoping to get my degree in a couple of years, but that doesn't get people interested in knowing more of why you're there, or why you're interested in accounting. So tell people, I'm here, I'm interested in careers in accounting. I'm here to learn more about it, introduce myself to you at the table, and maybe have you give me some advice or something that I might consider that might be helpful in my journey of getting into the accounting profession. What that does, another word for warm is relationships. And the way you get into the process of finding work is either through just cold processes, which is online and doing things I described, or creating a network, creating 3, 4, 5 relationships in the accounting industry that can act as mentors or guides or giving you advice. People that are already employed, people you've met for the first time. And what happens is these people become interested in helping you succeed. You wouldn't think that. Why would a perfect stranger be interested in me, an accounting major, for example, at Mount Hood? Well, people who are in business, who have been successful, almost everyone has a deep interest in helping other people exploring those careers. And they won't volunteer or seek you out. You have to ask them. So this idea of introducing yourself, notice that you're not looking for referrals. This is not asking for people to refer you to companies. This is introductions. A referral implies some endorsement. Some people are uncomfortable with that word, but you can introduce yourself to people all day long because it's a common way that we socialize. So what I'm advocating here when I say warmer reductions is, if you haven't already, is begin to identify people in the community, maybe people you work with that are doing accounting work, and spend some time developing a relationship with them, talking to them about your goals and aspirations, and asking them about their experiences, their advice. What would you do if you were me? What would you avoid? What are some of the opportunities in the accounting community I should look at? And this can apply to marketing majors. It can apply to anyone. And you can do these at these business meetings like the Chamber of Commerce. It's very common. I think I've mentioned this again. I'll mention it again. Every Friday, the Gresham Chamber of Commerce has a networking meeting. It's about warm introductions, and it's Friday mornings. I think it's 7:30. They provide coffee and donuts at some central location, and people go there to meet people and get introduced. Many of those people are looking for work, but it's understood that's why you're there. So start to think more about creating relationships in the industry with 3 or 4 or 5 people. Now, you could be sitting here saying, I don't know anybody. I know people on campus, but I don't know anybody in the community. Well, attend a business meeting. a Chamber of Commerce meeting, a community meeting that is relating to accounting. Go to Mount Hood's accounting department, talk to the head of accounting for Mount Hood. Ask them, start talking to them, ask them who they know you should talk to. Who else should I talk to? You start to develop names. You're developing circle of relationships, business relationships. They're going to help you reveal these hidden job markets where they aren't posted online. And you're going to be introduced to people who make decisions. It's interesting. Some of you may have experienced this. I know I have, where I've actually had a job offer because of the network and introductions, people I knew. And then after having the job offer made, they asked me for my resume after the fact. And the decision to hire was made very quickly. So, this is something I'll harp on more and more, is that you should develop and seek out. And I'm not talking about a bunch of people. I'm not talking about collecting business cards. I'm talking about the relationships that I'm talking about that are warm introductions, are people, 3, 4, or 5 people, maybe max, where if you were in Safeway and someone saw you coming down the aisle, they would say, "Oh, hello, Luis. Good to see you." It's not who you know, it's who knows you. So your job is to develop these relationships to the point where people will know you by name and are willing to help you. What's a resume? A brief document with qualifications for a job. That's all it is. It's a record of relevant work experience and education. It's a tool to showcase your personal brand. A personal brand is really another way of saying, how do I differentiate myself from everyone else who's looking at trying to get this job? It's a tool to get job interviews, and it's an evolving document. Evolving document simply means that you're going to edit, change, and adapt the interview or the resume over time. As you gain experience, you gain insights, you're going to change phraseologies, the order of things. So that's really what it is. It's a brief document that talks about relevant work that sets you apart from everyone else who's applying for a job. What's the role? To do warm introductions. Now, if I were starting over today and I would go to I'd go to the now there are 3 chambers of commerce, oddly enough. There's a Gresham Chamber, there's a Near East Side Chamber of Commerce, and there's a Portland Chamber of Commerce. There's also the Columbia Corridor Association, which is an association that's independent of Gresham's Chamber, which involves all small businesses along the Columbia River from the airport, Portland's PDX, down to Gresham. And there are other associations out there. They have meetings, they have lunches, you have a good chance to meet people. So start to think about that. Cold leads, that's basically just sending your resume out. If you're uncomfortable with warm leads or doing that, before you give up on it, I would tell you that if you're solely going to use cold leads, it's going to take you longer, and you're going to have to be more patient to be able to find work opportunities if you're just purely using cold leads. It's just the way it is. People there's not a lot of people know how to use warm introductions. In fact, it's very few, but they're very effective at it. And they're going to be the ones that are going to be ahead of you in being able to interview and apply for these job opportunities. So, the question at the bottom of the slide is which is going to be more likely in getting you a job interview. Certainly the warm introductions are, by far, no questions, not even close. Resume process, what do employers do? They use the resume scanning software to flag a few resumes with keywords that match the job requirements. So when you find a job posting you like, in this example, look at the job requirements. Look at the first 2 to 3 bullet points, because typically the first 2 or 3 represent about 80% of what the employer needs in that job. So look at how they phrase it, look at the words they use, and if it's appropriate, you can edit your resume using those keywords so that the software that scans them are going to pick up the keywords on your resume to match with the job posting. Person and Human Resources, a recruiter or staff scans flag resumes and chooses a few for the next step. All of the resumes are deleted in 6 months. So what they'll do is they'll you may never hear from the company, and they'll store your resume for 6 months and then they'll delete it. It'll be gone. So what ends up happening is after the software scanned all of these resumes and whittled it down, let's just say 15 or 20% of the applicants, then they'll go through quickly and visually scan your resume to reduce it down to a manageable number. Hiring manager reviews selected resume and chooses a few for interviews. So, again, how can your resume get you an interview? It's got to be easy to read. Remember, the person that's processing your resume doesn't have time to, this is why I'm not a big advocate for a complex resume. A resume that has 3 columns, a picture, it's colored paper. Many times the software that they pass it through has instructions that if there are graphics used of any kind, pictures or whatever, it kicks the resume out because it's too hard to process. And an HR person might do the same thing. Now, if you're handing your resume to somebody and it's got a graphic and it's colored paper and it's 3 columns, it may work to your favor. But remember, most anyone that's with a company that you approach about work opportunities is going to direct you to the company's website. They're in fact, many of them are unwilling to take resumes. They want everybody to go through the same funnel. So, again, there was a time where people were saying, well, gee, if you make colored paper, it'll stand on a stack of white paper. If you put a picture in, it'll make you stand up. Don't do that. White paper, black ink. If you want to use graphics and photographs and what have you, put that in your LinkedIn profile. That's where it belongs, not on paper. You're going to make it much more difficult for the employer and you to find a meeting of the minds where you can look at particular job opportunities if it's not really simple and clean. Winning resumes introduces your personal brand statement. Sometimes at the top of resumes, there's some advice about putting like a 3 or 4 sentence brand statement. Here's what I'm looking for. Here's who I am. This is the opportunities I'm offering a potential employer, how I can help them. Tells a story at a glance with compelling language about your strengths and accomplishments, shows you have qualifications to meet your employer's needs, contains keywords or phrases that get through the scanning software, and offers professional image and good communication. Remember, again, all you're trying to do is get the employer to be interested enough in meeting you and knowing more. You don't want to give the employer so much information in the beginning that they don't need to talk to you. They can make a decision about not interviewing you based on what you provided. Main sections, you want to organize your resume. Again, we'll look at one in here in a minute. Your resume sections, optional resume sections. So let's go ahead and take a look at our resume. While I'm doing this, any questions so far? Everybody okay? All right. Okay, so let's see. Do this. Okay. All right, so let's take a look at an example. This is an example of a resume online. Jessica Claire. Notice it's really simple at the top, phone number. One caveat, if you haven't thought about this, if you've got a clever or cute email address, don't use it. I've seen students put, their emails as demonmaker@gmail.com or don't ask me questions@gmail.com. If you don't have one that's reasonable with your name on it, create a new one just for your resume work because it'll be a distraction. Notice this person's put a professional summary together. It's dedicated customer service professional, 7 years of experience, solid team player with positive demeanor, proven skills in establishing rapport with clients, committed to maintaining professional relationships, to increase profitability and drive business results. Now, I want to point out in this professional summary that, just pounding your chest in this kind of paragraph isn't going to help you. What I want to point out here is this last sentence: committed to maintaining professional relationships to increase profitability and drive business results, is an appeal to the employer to say, here's what I'm wanting and willing to help you do. It is, they're going to hire you for their reasons, not your reasons. So you want to include some phraseology that translates who you are into how you can help the company. Profitability is one, reducing expenses is another, driving business results. Skills, complaint resolution, technical support, retention, sales knowledge, multiple line phone talent, communication, problem solving, Salesforce CRM. Now, Salesforce is a brand of customer relationship management software that this particular company she's applying to may use, and that will be, maybe she's edited this so that she can include that element in her resume, because it'll be recognized by the software, and the person who might ultimately read this will see that, and that may make it distinct. Now, if you have skills with Microsoft Office or particularly Excel, one of the things that I would encourage you to do, if you know your way around Excel or have certifications in Excel, be sure to put that in your skill set. Most every company that's of 500 employees or less is an active user of Excel spreadsheets, and you're going to be asked to either create them, manage them, or read them, or know your way around pivot tables and other things. So if you're familiar with Excel and you've got any certifications at all, be sure to put that in your skill set. Now, so notice there's a professional summary, there's a skill area, there's a work history and education. And that's a good way to order this. Typically, when people read a resume, they want to look at your work history. They'll read this upper portion, but they want to get to this place. So you don't want to make this hard to get to. Now, notice this is white paper. It's one size font, I think. No, two sizes. You've got work history in one size, but it's the same font size. You've got bullet points. There's not long paragraphs or sentences. In fact, this professional summary is about as long as I would make it. If it gets any longer than that, people are not going to read it. So the person reviewing resumes, their eyes are going to go to this, gravitate to this area. Now, what I want to point out is that there are two ways to construct your work history. This one is called chronological. Chronological meaning, chronos meaning by date. So notice at the left-hand column, we have the dates of employment. This is called the chronological list. The most current job first, second most, third most, and that's the way you construct this. You got the title of the job you held, the company Verizon. Notice that call center representative ABS Supplies, sales associate Nike factory outlet. So you have the same templated process: the dates of employment, the title you had, and the company you work for, and then three pieces of information. Usually this is specific, detailed, quantifiable. It doesn't mean, I'm going to just make stuff up like I was a good employee, I showed up every time, I had 1,000, days without an absence. If that's all you got, okay, but that's not going to be helpful. Now, the way to organize this center, there's a second way to do this. This is chronological, like I said. The second way to do this is by job function. So the way this would be done differently is that instead of a date out here, you would put the customer service representative title out here. So you'd put customer service representative dash Verizon, and then the dates would be off to the right. Now, there's a reason to do this. This would be called a job function resume. And what you're trying to do is bring the attention of the reader to the job function you have, not the dates. And why this is important is that if you had a break in service or a period of time where you're unemployed, you're basically reinforcing the person reading this to point out that you had gaps in employment, which, if there are a lot of people applying for a job, may be reason enough not to have you go further in the process. So if and unless you've had a break in service, you could use a functional resume and put the dates on the right-hand margin, but you'd have call center representative out here, dash ABS supplies, and then the dates on the same line out to the right. So you're engaging the reader in the title of the work or the function you did and the job aspects. Notice that answer an average of 30 calls and emails each day, addressing customer inquiries, solving problems, and providing product information, adhere to company policy and scripts to consistently achieve call time and quality standards, scored in the top 5% of employees for achieving the lowest cancellation rates. That's really helpful to me if I'm looking for a customer service representative. I can see the person has some experience and they understand the important part of that job. So you're giving me metrics and a way to understand how you might work in my job that I have posted. I can see you in that job. I can see the work you did here, and I can translate that into the work job opportunity I have. At the bottom is education. Notice it's Associate of Arts, Business, Seattle Central College, Seattle, Washington. That might be the date you received the degree. If you were still in school, what I would do is I'd put a date here where you plan on graduating, and then I would put an Associate of Arts, in this case, Business, dash, expected to complete by that date. So, and that's sufficient. If you have other certificates you've earned either at college or in the industry, this is a place to put it. But again, you put the most recent achievement first and then move your way back toward history. Okay, so let me stop here and just see what questions you've got on the resume process, building your resume. Has anybody gone to career services on campus? No, don't know. Okay. I'd encourage you, if this looks like it's complicated or overwhelming, it's not that bad. And I would encourage you to go to the career services because they will actually help you build a resume from scratch. Here's another example. This is the same person who's organized it differently. This is what I would not advise you to do. It looks interesting to the eye, but the software program will not be able to read it. And because if it gets complex enough or the software can't follow it, because you've got two columns here, it will kick your resume out. I mean, the information's identical. And it looks interesting. It looks like it's distinct from someone else, but the computer doesn't care. And frankly, the employer doesn't really care either, unless they can understand this better than the next resume, because all the other resumes they're looking at look like this. When they come across this, it's somewhat overwhelming, and it may be the reason why someone, I mean, if they're looking to refine a pull down, this would be a reason potentially to kick your resume out. Here's another one using colors. I'm not an advocate for color. Frankly, some scanners can't pick up blue. So a lot of this information and organization isn't going to be seen. Here's another one. This one better, a little bit more clean. It's got a little bit of style to it, but it's fundamentally organized, very easy to follow and read. If I'm an employer, I can look at this and I can get through this in a few seconds and I can put you in the right pile. If I'm, coming across your resume like this, I don't have a lot of time to spend on this, and I might take a brief look at it, but I'm not going to take the time to read it that carefully. I'm just not. Here's another one, or the original one we looked at. So, okay, so I'm going to stop sharing here. We'll go back to chapter 4. Okay. Organize your resume, create a master. Now, one of the questions that typically comes up is, or is suggested, is that you have more than one resume, and that's fine. There's the way I would suggest it is you create a master resume, like the one we just looked at, and then from the master, if you find a particular job that you want to submit a resume to, but you want to edit it to accommodate the keywords in the job posting, then create a copy of this master resume, create a separate file for this company so that you don't lose track of the resume you sent them, and create your resume and submit it that way. But, this goes back to the first week where there was a suggestion about organizing files or notebooks. It's going to be important if you're doing a lot of activity, because you don't want to forget or overlook a resume you sent that you can't remember. Yeah, and use sections and layouts, accommodate a particular layout that's easy to follow. Resume sections, contact information at the top, pretty straightforward. Professional profile, qualifications, work experience, education. Typically, education's put last. For some of you, that may be, your biggest talking point. You may want to put your education first, work experience second. If the education is, you want to emphasize that more, and that's okay, as long as you keep it organized and clean, black and white. But you can move your education ahead of your work experience. Professional profile examples. So this is that statement at the top of your resume. You don't have to do this. You don't have to have a profile at the top. You can, but you don't have to. So one person said, I want to gain employment as a master chef at a 4-star restaurant, experienced master chef that excels in high stress, multiple priority environment, adds new creative energy and flavor with knowledge of international cuisine. So, again, the second part of this profile is appealing to the employer's needs, not how good I am. Don't think of the resume as a brochure about you. Think of it as a document you can use to engage an employer in a discussion about how you can help them. Seeking to serve as a welding technician in the utilities industry, detail-oriented welder known for not only fixing the problem, but also identifying additional needs, the strong passion for customer satisfaction. Okay, that's appealing to me as an employer. I'm very interested in knowing more about this. Main sections, qualifications, you want to talk about your experience. Transferable skills are, if you were a medical office technician, there would be some skills you'd be learning that were peculiar to a medical office. Those skills aren't necessarily transferable to a customer service rep position. So when you start talking about qualifications, you want to make sure you're emphasizing the skills you've learned, problem-solving skills, project management skills, or software skills, like I said, for Excel, and emphasize those in your qualifications. One of the things that I think, and I want to emphasize this, is that if you speak a second language, Russian, Spanish, Portuguese, Chinese, Japanese, make sure you emphasize that on your resume. And particularly in the West Coast and the Northwest, there are many businesses that are directly or indirectly related into trade in Asia, Southeast Asia. And many of these import-export companies, for example, need people who are fluent in English and another language. And you may feel like you're not fluent in English. You don't have to be perfect, but you need to be able to take a phone call from Japan, from Mexico, and be able to communicate as an import-export person how you can solve problems. So if you have a second language and you're mildly fluent in it, emphasize it. Put that in your resume. Work experience in education, list a reverse client. Well, that just simply means the latest job or education experience you had first, and then historically. You don't start with your history from 20 years ago going forward. It's obvious, never stretch the truth or lie. Don't describe accomplishment using the what, who, impact method, what you did, how you did it, what's the importance of it. So, remember this point here when you're putting bullets underneath your work experience. What is it you did? If it was customer service, okay, but what kind of customer service? Was it complaint resolution? Was it questions about orders? What was it exactly that you did? How did you do it? Did you engage people? How did you solve those problems? And then why was it important to the company? Maybe it kept the company from losing customers, or gaining more committed customers or repeat orders. Okay, what if I have little work experience? List any part-time, summer work, internships. Most employers understand if you're going to school full-time, you're not going to have full-time experience. You can even reach back to work you did prior to going to school. Internships are simply part-time jobs in the industry that you're seeking. They can be 4 or 5 hours a week. Some of you are already involved with me in an internship this term. When you get closer to graduation, you'll find that you're going to work with me on getting placed in an internship somewhere. And it negates the question the employer has that you don't have experience. You have some unique experience, and actually has value. Lit school projects and community work. Sometimes at Mount Hood, you will work with a local employer, or you may work on a project that relates to a local problem the community has. Point that out, list that in your resume. Emphasize transferable skills. We talked about that already. Things that the employer can benefit, things you've learned. The other way to look at this, emphasizing transferable skills, the employer has one concern that goes like this. If I hire you and I put you in this particular role, am I going to need to train and educate you to do that job? And if I do, I may want to look at someone who has some basis for experience, because I don't have the time or patience for teaching you how to do a job that you don't know how to do. So transferable skills is an area where you can help the employer understand that you can actually, get to work right away. I mean, they can drop you in the job and they can turn around and start working on other issues, and you can move forward and get that job done. Optional resume sections, related experience, memberships, awards, leadership positions, trade or professional associations. Remember, I was encouraging you to join a industry association. This is where those come into play. Any honorary groups you're in, any other organizations outside, community work, church work, military service. Emphasize the training responsibilities you did. I mean, were you a diesel mechanic? Were you, deployed to Iraq? Were you a lieutenant, sergeant, major, whatever? What was the role you did? Personal information, do not list your age, your marital status, or any photos, except for jobs like modeling, which is somewhat unique. And what you really are trying to avoid here, the process of hiring people has become so complex and so risky for employers for state and federal requirements that they avoid any information that's personal. They don't want to know about it. They don't want to look at it. They will not spend the time with any information that relates to this. You may be very proud of your grandkids. That's a topic for potentially a face-to-face interview, but it's not something you put on your resume. Gathering information, organize and prioritize. What is a wow factor? Meaning what's impressive that might be unique. Some of you don't know this, but I'm a helicopter pilot. That's kind of a wow factor because people aren't expecting an applicant to be also a private pilot. So that adds a little bit of an edge to potentially me moving along in the process. Language, concise, powerful descriptions. Now with Word now and other tools like Grammarly and even artificial intelligence, you can create some pretty powerful descriptions that can help guide you. giving evidence, giving proof of your skills. I'm a people person. Okay, well, what does that mean? Meaning you like to talk to your neighbors and have a beer? Are you willing to go in and confront people on issues and problems to resolve them? What does that mean? Where's the evidence? You participated in a union negotiation. That's evidence. References, identify good references now, don't list references in a resume. There used to be a time when you'd include your references with your resume. If you're going to have references, include it as a separate document and wait to be asked for it. On your resume, you can say references available upon request, but don't provide that information. A lot of your references don't want that information out there just randomly. So as a courtesy, if you have references organized, and 3 are fine unless they're specifically asking for more. Set up your LinkedIn profile if you don't have it already. If you don't know what LinkedIn is, jump on YouTube and start listening to some videos about how to set up a profile correctly, how to get your social media imprint out there. LinkedIn is somewhat like a Facebook for business. It's a online resume. Sometimes people will sell services, advice, consulting, coaching through LinkedIn. Some people are actively looking to network. Some are actively looking for work opportunities. And align your business card. Some, it doesn't, not so much today, but there was a time when if you were interested in looking for new job opportunities, you'd get a business card made up with your basic name information on it, maybe what interest you had, what industry, and you would hand that out at Chamber of Commerce meetings and what have you, as opposed to your resume. Never lie or stretch the truth. If you can't prove it, doesn't belong in a resume. Employers can and do verify facts. When they do a background check, by law, if I'm your former employer and you've applied for a job and that new employer wants to talk with me, they can. But by law, I'm only allowed to talk about the dates you were employed and to verify income. That's it. I can't talk about your attitude, why you got fired or why you got laid off or why you quit. There isn't, do you have a family? Do you live in the area? Did they do a good job? None of that discussion. I'd say 9 out of 10 employers know this and are very reluctant to have a conversation about your work experience. Now, if your former employer is willing to act as a reference and put that in writing, then you're basically giving the employer, your former employer, permission to talk about those details, and you can do that. But you'll need to have that in writing, because employers are not going to take the risk of having that conversation. Truth has a way of coming out. Maybe after you've been hired, you can be fired. That's why those probationary periods where information can surface. Companies typically do pretty good due diligence and background today. Motor vehicles, credit checks, criminal histories, all of that. Building a LinkedIn profile. Using your resume content when building your profile, add skills and get endorsements. Endorsements are people that maybe work where you used to work who are willing to endorse your LinkedIn profile. In the appendix of the book, there's some information. I would, maybe the book's okay, but I'd jump on YouTube and just look at basics of LinkedIn and try to get an idea of it. You don't have to have a perfect profile, but I'd at least get started. Real world scenarios, composite stories for real people. Some resume feedback from Diana was to use more keywords, so you can get it through the resume scanning software, verbally describing skills and experience. What keywords will you use? And you can look to the job postings that you're applying for keywords. Wow factors, thought back on all experience to find commonalities, known for having a creative eye. What's your wow factor? So if people were described, you can do this with friends. You can just say over coffee, if you're going to describe me with 1 or 2 words, what words would you use? And once you get past the sarcasm and jokes, you may find that there's some interesting skills or personality traits you have that you weren't aware of that your friends appreciate. And that might be useful in a work environment. Resumes that win are planned. Nothing's typed without thought being put into it. Just as you would think about before you speak, the virtual world, you must think before you type. And that includes not only what to say, but what not to say. So job search journey, we're here in phase 2, create your resume. Next week, we're going to get into applying for jobs, where to find them, how to write the applications. But right now we're in this phase 2. And this is the end of chapter 4. So any questions on chapter 4?
So one page will be, or it's preferable to have a resume as a one page.
Okay, I'm getting an echo from you, Loner. So it's hard to hear. Can you type that into the chat at the bottom?
Okay.
Okay. So it's good to have always one-page resume. If you can, I mean, I would say generally, yes. 2-page resumes. If you're going to have a 2-page, make sure that there's enough content balanced on both pages, that you're not carrying over a few sentences into the second page, that there's actually, it looks like it's organized. And if you've got, background information, skills that you feel important, go ahead and do that. But if it's an attractive particular job opening, or one that you would expect a number of people to apply to, you want to reduce the risk of having your resume kicked out of a software program, because it does have 2 pages. So I would say generally, yes, always good to have 1 page, but 2 isn't going to be a deal killer. You just have to look at it. It's almost like a portrait that you're showing someone, and it has to be professional and business-like. So yeah, if you feel good about a 1-page resume, fine. If you want to go 2, just try to pay attention to having it some meat on the second page. It's meaningful. Hopefully that helps.
Yes. Thank you.
Okay, Lorna, thank you. All right, let's go to chapter 5, writing your resume. So chapter 5 covers writing a resume content, editing the resume, formatting the resume for web and print. Now, what's interesting here is that there was a time formatting for your resume for web and print. It was just simply formatting your resume because you were going to mail it or you're going to drop it off. It was a paper. Then scanning came into play, and then graphic software and different social media systems, and companies having their own system for uploading resumes. So one of the things we want to be paying attention to is the digital nature of your resume. In some cases, you want your resume formatted so it can come up on a cell phone, believe it or not. So in the goal in phase 2, step 2 is to write a powerful, effective resume that works in print, email, online using these steps: writing the resume, editing the resume, formatting the resume for web and print, like I just said. Now that you have gathered the data, and again, if you need help, there's PDF documents on this week that you can help, kind of give you some teasing to understand what you might be missing. Writing your resume a section at a time. So you've got if you have an opening statement, you've got your work history, you've got your education, maybe an area for skills, highlighting unique personality, providing a concise picture of what an employer can expect of you with each section. So the personality part, I'd caution you a little bit on, because personality is very hard to convey in an electronic environment. Most of you know this. if you've ever texted anybody or emailed someone where they misunderstood what you were saying, or you were trying to be funny or sarcastic, or, I mean, things get lost in translation when you're in an online environment. And I would try to save the personality elements. I might reference my personality, but not try to demonstrate it in any form until I got in front of someone where they could actually see this and experience it. As far as sections, use specific examples, action words, and keywords. So we'll start looking at that. So let's be purposeful. Don't include every task you ever were assigned. Only the ones that you think are valuable to the employer, and then explain them in a way that they see that value. Being a project manager and just stating that doesn't help me. If you say being a project manager completed 2 projects that saved the company 2% in revenue, 1% in expenses, that starts to get my attention as an employer. Be purposeful about what you include and, more importantly, what you exclude. So this isn't a life story that you're trying to do. You're not also pleading with someone to hire you by trying to tell them you're a good person and you work hard. You'll get a chance to do that in an interview later. Craft what you want a prospective employer to see of your history. So you're basically creating a picture, a snapshot, a Polaroid. Here's who I am. And you've got a moment to get the employer's attention before they move on to the next candidate. So you want to be somewhat concise and direct and reinforcing. Help you stand out from other applicants, highlight successes and achievements, and minimize the mundane, the ordinary tasks. Answering phones. I mean, if that's a specific skills or responsibility you had, but answering the phone could be considered, mundane, but answering complaints, phone-in complaints, handling confrontations with successfully handling confrontations with customers, all of that is much more valuable and meaningful. Using specific examples, be persuasive with specific examples using numbers. So the general side on here is, I might put bullet points that said I reduced costs significantly, or I was the leading producer. A better way to do it would be to reduce costs by 20%, or as a top producer of 30 employees. That's a much better way to represent yourself in these examples. Writing the resume, you want to use action verbs. This statement's okay. Start an inventory tracking system, saving time and increasing efficiency. That's not bad. It's not really good yet. A stronger would be design and implement an inventory tracking system, saving time and increasing efficiency. So notice I've introduced the words design and implement it. A strong one is I raised $55,000 and organized and trained volunteers for citywide elder help campaign. There's a lot in that sentence that tells me you have a bias for action, that you get things started, you organize, direct people, and you've done it successfully. Another strong one would be reduce final ballot processing time by 25% by coordinating the school student body election. So what's saying in that sentence is that you looked at a process that was used and you improved the process by making it more efficient. And I need someone in this job who thinks like someone who can analyze systems and processes from an efficiency standpoint. So that makes you interesting and attractive. If all you said was you started tracking inventory systems and saved time by increasing efficiency, that's not getting my attention as much as the last one does. Action verbs. You can Google these words or Google lists. I adapted, I administered, I analyzed, I arranged, I assessed, I cataloged, I changed, I collaborated with a group. In a project management, I eliminated waste. I established new standards. I executed a plan according to the way it was done. I expedited customer complaints. I formulated new solutions. I proposed. I suggested. I streamlined. I started. A lot of these action verbs are behavioral. They're a bias toward action, and it allows the reader to see that you're actually you're not getting credit for a result. You actually were involved in creating the result by using these words. use keywords strategically. Remember, the scanning software selects resumes with keywords. So if I've got a basic resume and I have a customer service job or an accounting job at Nike I want to apply for, I'm going to look at the keywords that Nike's using, particularly in the first 2 or 3 key job functions, because that's where they're going to basically tell me what this work is. And I'm going to try to find a way to include those keywords in my resume. So I may take my basic resume, edit it and update it for this particular job at Nike, identify it as the Nike resume, and submit that or upload that to Nike. Finding keywords, you see them in job listings. Sometimes you'll find them in industry websites or employer websites. Sometimes the way they list the jobs on the employer websites will show you that. Spelling, grammar, format, all critical. Remember, having 3 columns, having graphics, using more than 2. I would say 3 at the most, but 2 is probably better font style. Don't use different fonts. Use bold and non-bold, certainly, but be careful about how you construct this. Too many fonts makes it tedious to read. Common grammar mistakes, edit your resume to avoid, and I'm saying use Grammarly or word check. My computer, your computer, if you have Microsoft Word on it, you can actually go up and do a spell check, and you can do a grammar check within Word. It's not really robust. Another way to go is using Grammarly. I believe Grammarly has a free download program where they'll go through and look at all of your spelling, all your grammar, sentence construction, and they'll actually offer different ways to express what you were expressing in your resume. Be clear and concise, customize your resume, have a basic or standard version, then tailor to a specific work opportunity. That's fine. Particularly if you're in a technical industry, that might be important. Common grammar mistakes to avoid. Homophones. Basically are words that sound alike. So 2, and 2. The word TO, the word TOO, and the word TWO. We'll get through a spell check, but if they're not appropriate to the way you're describing something, that's going to be an error and you'll get kicked out. So resume get kicked out. Possessives versus contractions, don't, won't, isn't. Be careful about using too much of those. Contractions can be useful and helpful, but try not to overuse them in your resume. Inconsistent tense, was, were, am. I mean, if you're describing things you achieved in a particular job, make sure it's of the same tense. Misspell words, abbreviations, capitalizations. Don't use social media acronyms, LOL, 2BH, all those things. I think I said this last week that the advisory committee that I have put together, there was one complaint they had of all 12 people participating. These are 12 in different industries in different parts of Portland. They all, every one of them said that it's tedious and distracting that their new employees don't know how to construct emails and text in a way that can be read without using some of these shortcuts that they're used to. And in fact, they were arguing that some of the business emails are far too informal and aren't constructed in a way to convey information the way it needs to be done. Font sizes, variations I talked about already. Be clear and concise. Pass the 30-second resume scan test. In other words, you can even take your watch, give yourself 30 seconds and see if you can scan your resume and basically come away with an impression of who you are and what you're doing. You want to make it easy to read, clear and concise, well formatted. What you can do is use phrases, not sentences, particularly if it's in an accounting industry. Sometimes there are phrases that are used that you want to include. Be focused and concise. Omit a me, I, me, my. They know it's about you. I mean, it's you can do a little bit of that, but try to, because it sounds like chest pounding and bragging to some degree. Use bullets, just one idea per line. And if you're going to use bullets, try to get it done in 1 or 2 sentences. If you have a bullet and it's a run-on sentence, that's not going to be helpful. Customize your resume. Start with a master resume and customize these sections using words from the job listing. Your employment goal, you can recraft your qualifications. You can organize differently, reorder your experience to match the job priority listing, or add in or substitute words from job listings for the industry. Okay. Customize your print resume. Again, the 3-column version with graphics, if you want to use that version as a handout, that's fine. But if you're directed to put it into a company's website or upload it, you can create problems for yourself. And the issue is that you will never know it. You'll never know why no one called you. And it could simply be that the software didn't recognize your resume. Print resumes, delivery, hard copy, mail in envelope. There should be an I there, or an E. In-person, face-to-face. Attach a file in an email, upload a file online. When final, save as a PDF. In other words, you can submit Word documents, but the best way to do it is, once you've got it in final form, is to put it in a PDF, because it can't be edited. It can't, get skewed. Sometimes the software programs they use can distort Word documents. Doesn't happen often, but it can happen. Print resume formatting, use the whole page, fill the page, 1-inch margins, create a visual hierarchy, like a, section, outline section. Don't use all capitals, use a standard font. The typical ones are Arial and Calibri. And font sizes are typically 11 to 14. If you get down to the size 11 or lower, it begins to be hard to read. And people who are going to read your resume are people like me who are older. So you want to try to make it easy to read. Use bulleted lists instead of paragraphs. Format the same elements the same way. Format the same elements the same way. Add a line break between sections. Use color sensibly. Don't make color a feature. I'm a avoid color, because again, some scanners don't pick up colors correctly. And print on one side only, white or cream colored paper. And if you're going to use 2 pages, use a full second page. Don't use headings, resume, or contact information at the top, because they know that's what it is. You don't have to point that out. Don't use excessive decorative fonts or formatting. Don't crowd text to fit everything onto one page. Don't use multiple columns. Doesn't scan well. Don't adjust the spacing between characters. Avoid special effects, light colored shadows, white text on dark, box text. Now, if you're in the entertainment industry, you're an actor, actress, a performer, maybe some of that starts to make sense, but I wouldn't do it. Don't fold or staple. Use a paper clip, because again, someone's going to be scanning this, and you're going to add extra work to kind of separate the pages. Printing a plain text resume has no formatting needed for uploading on some sites, helpful for ease of copy and paste on to online forms. If you've got a fairly straightforward, easily organized resume, you can copy and paste it into a company's website pretty easily. So that's something to keep in mind. Creating plain text resume, save the resume with different name, format the file so it converts to a clean text file. Replace bold and all caps and bullets with hyphens, remove tabs if 2 pages, delete page breaks, save the stripped down file as a document, Word doc, text file, etc. These are, and for the most part, I don't think you're going to worry about these too much, because your Word document files, even Google Docs, tends to have these corrections built into it. Online resume, it can have an advantage. We can add graphics or sound or video. This is an addition to a printed resume, not a substitute. LinkedIn is a good way to start. You can actually post an introductory video of yourself on your LinkedIn site. You can have your resume downloadable from your LinkedIn site, so people can look at your profile on LinkedIn. And if they want to save information or get information about you, they can actually download your resume into that. Proofread all job search documents and communications, follow all grammar rules, try this print documents at a highlight any errors, fix them, read aloud and listen for errors in awkward text, ask someone to read, to review your work. This is a really valuable one. I did this once and I thought I had edited it to, exhaustively. And the person who read it actually read it twice and found two errors, one spelling error, one grammar error that I missed totally. So asking someone else to read it can be helpful. Don't volunteer negative information about yourself. Don't discuss compensation. Now the reason you have to understand, and I've said this before, that this process of interviewing is a process of deception. And I don't mean that the intent is to deceive people. What I am saying is that the information you're providing to an employer is inclusive of all of the great skills and experience and knowledge you have, that you're a valuable person to hire. It does not include any history, any things you're average in or you failed in. At the same point, the company is doing the same thing. They're providing you only with positive information, their mission statement, how great the company morale is, all the benefits are there. What they're not telling you about is the sexual harassment lawsuit, or the fact they had to have a layoff last June, or that their product manufacturing is subject to a lawsuit for product failure. You're not going to hear the company talk about that. So it's okay not to volunteer negative information because the company's basically doing the same thing. What's important here is that the company's going to do due diligence on your background. You need to do due diligence on the company's background. And you need to check public information to really understand who the company is. Internet resources, resume guidelines vary. Stay up to date using the internet to research resume strategies, find answers to your resume questions, search for writing and formatting, find examples of power words and industry words, access samples. You can, again, I'd caution you to not spend so much time being a resume geek that you're not looking at other important aspects of this. Because remember, the resume isn't going to get you the job. It's going to get you the opportunity to continue in the process. So looking at things on how to interview correctly, how to manage the interview, how to find hidden job opportunities. Those are better places to spend time than perfecting your resume. You'll see several versions of your resume, customized resumes for some jobs, different formats. You need a system that keeps it all in sync. You can use this electronically. If you're going to do this electronically, you want to save it to your desktop. You want to save it to a second memory system. Am I trying to think of a separate document, like a thumb drive or something? So if your computer goes down or you're on your laptop, you've got a backup for all this information work you've done. Composite stories from real people, concise profile, wanted to list it all, ask friends for help, summarized main message, and gave just a few examples. Grammar errors, thought it was perfect, printed copies for interview, found 2 errors, fixed and printed, and gave interviewer copies. Just stay on top of that. You're the expert on yourself. What could be easier than writing about something you know about very well? It's up to you to decide how to show the best of yourself. So again, the presumption is that you know yourself well. Most of us never really think about that or really do know ourselves well. We tend to project who we are to people based on the fact that we want them to think well of us or think good of us, as opposed to who we really are and what our interests are. And so if you want to, I would go back and revisit the PDFs from the week 1 about knowing yourself well, and kind of go through this process of really knowing yourself in a way that you can communicate that. And so this is the last slide for chapter 5. Next week, we're going to get into job openings, job applications, and effective tailored cover letters. So we're going to start looking at this, and I'm probably going to suggest that you start, if you haven't already, with your resume, start making applications for jobs. And that starts to sound panicking and unnerving, but remember, you can apply for a job and get a job offer and decline the job. You don't have to take the job. But what I'm getting used to is getting used to the process of doing this. So it's not new. You're used to it. You understand the process, and applying for jobs. You apply for half a dozen jobs and 5 never get back to you. That's a good understanding about how this cold process that we're all involved in can work and can be disappointing. All right, so that is chapter 5. So what questions do you have? No questions? Okay. All right, so after we get off the call here, if you think of something, email me. And if you have a question during the week, certainly let me know. And if I don't hear from you, I'll look forward to seeing everybody next week again at 10:30, not 9 o'clock. So it's 10:30 next week. And hope everybody has a great, safe weekend. And I'll talk to you soon.
Thank you.